very heavy core, which is common.
Yeah. Okay, I have a list of questions, but now one came up to my mind. And I know that there are like some very important books in behavioral economics. And one of them is Nudge, right? And I know that many people heard that as a buzzword. And how would you explain that idea of nudge in your words?
So for Hebrew speakers, it's much easier. Think of nudnik. Think of the Hebrew
Yeah.
word nudnik, which there are some people who claim that nudge came from nudnik. So it's a gentle
Yeah.
push towards the right decision. That's nudge,
Mm-hmm.
which means if the default option in your organization card would be, yes, I want to be a donor, and you have to check in if you don't want to be a donor, that's a nudge towards to be donor decision, which is good decision if you think that's the good thing to do, right?
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if the default decision would be I don't want it, you have to check in if you want to be, that's a push, again, very gentle push, because you still can choose otherwise, right? Towards the other decision, and it make a huge difference. If you check the map and if you read anything about it, you can see that
Mm-hmm.
those countries with the default yes are much higher in organ donation compared to those which is by default no. That's Nudge. Very important book. Not the easy to read, not the easiest to read. There are some better.
So, what would be the first like two or three that you would say if you want to understand behavioral economics, you should read?
You should read one of Dan Ariely's books, and
Mm-hmm.
preferably the first one, Predictably Rational. He have written since then another 6 books, but the first one remains the best one. And the second would be Danny Kahneman's book, Think Fast and Slow. Danny is a Nobel Prize laureate of 2002, and he's one of the brightest minds living today. That's a great, great book.
Okay, so I'll add it to my list. Although I read some of Dana Ariely's, but I don't think it was the first one. So, what is your toolbox for critical thinking and better decision making?
It very depends on what area. I mean, because we are so heavily impacted by our environment, I mean, even the temperature of the water I'm drinking now impact my engagement with you. So every
Mm-hmm.
tiny detail in the environment impacts us. So it's very important to focus on a specific environment. So is it, a pilot cockpit or a trader computer or maybe a mobile app of carpool, an actual real example when we try to convince people to carpool with others, which is very damn hard in Israel, right? So
It
it's
is.
very, very important in what environment you're making your decisions. And then we can construct good toolbox. So let's take one example, for instance,
Let's take the carpool one. And
carpool.
another reason, other than the fact that you mentioned it's hard in Israel, I could have lots of like reason of my own. But I worked with Waze many, many years ago, and we had this feature of carpooling. And it was one of the features that they wanted they have it, but they wanted it to be much more. So I'm interested in that.
So let me tell you a real story about
Yeah.
moving,
Mm-hmm.
and then to explain it, why it works and how we can replicate it in our daily life. So Movit really wanted people to carpool. They were fighting with Waze and Google over carpool because everyone realized that's going to be the operating system of the self-driving cars, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they invested a lot in trying to convince people to carpool. So there is the most important screen when you actually decide, would you go with someone if you are the one who takes carpool, or would you take someone with you if you the driver.
Yeah.
And product wise thinking, they put it their photos of those who ask you for a ride with some details about them and how far they from your route and how much money you will make, just from taking them with you. But from the decision making point of view, it made sense to take off the photos and just leave the name and the coordinates and the money. And after they try to take off the photos, which is completely nonsense from the product point of view,
Yeah.
they raise by 17% the conversion
Wow.
rate of the carpooling. Why?
Why?
Because it's a difficult decision when you see a face. That's a social decision. So many stereotypes and experiences and thoughts and desires tied to a face, right? It's what she dressed with, and what color of her skin, and all the rest of features of other people. So it's a very difficult decision, and we just decide not to decide. We postpone the decision. But if
Yeah.
it's just a name and a coordinate and amount of money, it's much easier. So you push the option, and 50 minutes later, you figure out that you actually invited an actual person to your car, but that's later. Now it was an easy decision to make. So that's a
Yeah.
very important point. Make your good decisions easy to make and bad decisions difficult to make. For
Yeah.
instance, in your frigidaire, put, in that height, the healthy stuff, and all the
Yeah.
unhealthy stuff put as high as you possible and as low as possible. So it will be harder for you to actually get it. It
Yeah.
will work. It will work.
Yeah. It's the same as saying like don't leave the knife next to the cake because then you just
Yeah.
flat you cut it more and more. So we have a comment here about the books. David Wasserman says that Any Duke has Thinking in Bets is a good one as well. Do you know
Yeah,
that
and
one?
Duke is a great researcher.
Thanks, David.
It's a new wave of books. And by the way, every year, a new 15 more or less new books about decision making coming out. That's a very
Wow.
hot topic. Yeah, it's a very crowded space. So Annie Duke is she's an amazing, and that's a great book. Less a fundamental one, but that's a great, actually great book.